You're listening to Thursday Night AMP on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
AngryMarks.com, pro wrestling and mixed martial arts podcast. My name is Steve J. I've got my two co-hosts on the line, and we're about to call a special guest, but let me start by introducing Tai Chi William Huckabee.
What's up? I'm finally back at the Huckabee Estates after a whirlwind 2.5 weeks, where I went to two countries and 7 states, or something like that. It was just crazy. I've had a very interesting April.
Yes, you have, and we're going to get into that very shortly. Let me also introduce Jason, a.k.a. The Great Sudoku.
When Vince McMahon dies, I'm going to do 2 things. Number 1 is throw a party. Number 2 is going to be to find his grave and piss all over it.
Well, you go right ahead and do that, but before you do that, we're getting our special guest on the line, Matt Farmer from DEFY Wrestling, and I didn't see his phone ring, so let me try that again. I don't know why it didn't.
Oh?
Hey, Matt Farmer.
Yay, how's it going, man?
It's good, it's good. Hey, this is Stevie J, and this is Thursday Night AMP, and thank you so much for joining us. Let me introduce you to my 2 co-hosts, Mr. William Huckabee. Say hello to Matt Farmer.
How you doing, Matt Farmer?
Good, man. How are you, William?
I'm doing great,
And my other co-host
good.
is Jason, a.k.a. The Great Sudoku. Jason, say hi.
Good evening to you, Mr. Farmer.
Good evening, Jason.
All right, so Matt, you are a man of many titles and many accomplishments. So how should we direct our title to you? Should we say wrestling historian, wrestling promoter, wrestling fan, or all of the above?
I would say all of the above. Some days I'm not a fan because there's a lot of work involved in it, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
Well, there's definitely a lot of work when you're running a wrestling show, so let me just start with that, because DEFY Wrestling has become a staple now of the Pacific Northwest, and that was always a hot wrestling scene, always a competitive market and landscape. What made you decide to jump in with both feet?
Well, really what it was is a lack of wrestling in the Northwest. For a long period of time, it was a great area for wrestling, but then we had a lull. We had a lull for a good 10, 15 years where there were some good companies, and there still are some good companies, but there weren't a lot of nationally known companies. The Northwest was like a black hole. And so my partner, Jim Perry, he really, it was his dream too, to really start a company, do something similar to what other companies are doing around the world, and bring a high-level independent wrestling promotion into the Northwest.
Which you have done. You're getting top talent for all of your shows, including the one coming up tomorrow night, which we've got to plug extensively before this interview is through. But again, before I get into that, I want to know, when you decided there's this hole and we've got to fill it, what was the first challenge that you had to overcome?
The first challenge is just getting licensed. In the state of Washington, Washington State's got a really aggressive Department of Licensing. So you've got to make sure that all your T's are crossed, I's are checked, So just a lot of political red tape to get through before you actually can open the doors. And then, it's like opening a small business, and we run DEFY Wrestling like a small business. That's really how we kind of manage the company. We run it like a business.
Now, as for what I know of getting a wrestling promotion up and running, which I haven't tried to do because I'm not, well, I don't want to say you're crazy, but it takes a little bit of chutzpah, how about we say, to start a wrestling promotion. But
Yeah.
I at least looked into the background of it where I live at one point, and you had to have an ambulance on standby, you had to have insurance, you had to have the promoter's license, like you just mentioned. So, is it that complicated for Washington as well?
It is. It's really complicated. There's other things that are necessary too. Surety bonds, background checks. And of course, when you go into certain buildings, they require insurance above what you might have already. So it could be very challenging, and plus then you have to go and, you have to reach out to wrestlers that are willing to get licensed and things like that too.
That's true. So then the next obvious question would be, it's a passion project for both you and your partner, and it's a void that you wanted to fill, but is it the kind of proposition where you can turn a profit, or are you just looking to break even?
No, this is, the goal for this, the goal for DEFY is, I would assume for every promotion or promoter, I would assume would be to turn a profit. We're in the middle of a growth period right now where we are building the company and growing the company, and we're expanding into new markets and new towns. But you also have to turn a profit because it's something that, you have to, you realize that your first few years, there's not going to be a lot of profit there, because you're going to put that profit back into the company. But at the same time, you want it to be at a point where it's not just draining your savings.
Very true. But that is a difficult challenge for any promoter, let alone one that aspires to bring in the best indie talent available. And I'll just throw out one name just for a start, because coincidentally, he's somebody that we've had on our show as a guest, and it was right before he went to Lucha Underground, so we kind of popped the cork on his champagne. And I want to say Shane Strickland can't be an easy grab for an indie promoter. I'm sure he commands a good dollar.
He does, but he's worth it for us. Shane he was born in the Northwest. He didn't spend a lot of time here. But he's like a hometown guy, even though he doesn't live here, and the fans took to him like a hometown guy. It's rare that I've seen a fan base get behind a wrestler that they were unfamiliar with. What I mean by unfamiliar personally, as far as watching live, than they did with Shane Strickland. I mean, they chant for Shane at the beginning of the show, at the middle of the show, and when he comes out to the ring, it's like a superstar's arrived, so they really have gotten behind Shane and supported him, and in return, he loves wrestling out here in the Northwest in front of those fans, and he feels at home here. And it's a promotion that he's made a priority for, so that's good for us.
Yeah, and, well, he should make it a priority considering he's the champion right now. And that leads me to DEFY
exactly.
Vibes, because you've got a very interesting main event tomorrow night. It's champion versus champion, with Shane defending against the self-proclaimed belt collector, Austin Aries.
Yeah, and that's a big match because it's our champion against their champion, and both championships are on the line. We've had a relationship with Impact Wrestling for some time now. One of our matches even aired on their television show a few months ago, and it's strange when you have two champions wrestling each other because both companies want to protect the champion, So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting. Austin's an awesome wrestler himself, and he's been making a lot of waves, collecting a lot of championships. But Shane, at the same time, he's kind of like our guy, So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of that Impact relationship, how did it come about? Did they reach out to you? Did you reach out to them? Was it a meeting of the minds in the middle?
Yeah, it was a meeting of the minds in the middle, actually. We were interested in some talent. They were interested in some content, and so we just kind of came together. One thing that I really enjoy about Impact, what they're doing now, is they are reaching out to some companies, and they are showing those companies to their fan base, and I think it freshens up their product as well, you know? I know as a viewer, just as a fan, it's cool to watch their show and be exposed to companies like DEFY or Border City Wrestling or, you know, some of the other companies that air. They've even aired a Crash and things like that on their shows. So that's really cool to me.
And it really feels, to me at least, and my co-host may disagree, and I'm going to tag them in a minute, but to me it feels like Impact has turned a corner in the last few months where for the long time they had that pallor of death hanging over their heads with Dixie Carter and TNA and the whole mismanagement and lawsuits by everybody. But now it seems like with Anthem and the new ownership and their new focus on working with indie promoters, it's starting to feel like a cool place to be again.
You know, the sad thing about it is they're not, and they shouldn't be compared to the company of old, because to be completely honest, there's very few people that work with that company that were there when it was TNA.
I think Abyss might be the only talent left.
Oh yeah. Talent. There's some talent, yeah, but I meant behind the scenes.
Oh right.
You know, they've completely freshened it up. You know, they've got owners that their owners have a vision. You know, that's something that TNA was kind of lacking before, a vision. You know. So, I've always been, like, years ago, I was kind of critical of things that TNA did, and I think a lot of wrestling fans were, but what I see of them and what they're doing now, it's refreshing to me. There's all the things you can nitpick everything, you know, but, man, they got some great talent, and they've been having some pretty entertaining shows, and I appreciate what they're doing now. I really do.
Right on. Well, let me go ahead and tag in the AIWF Heavyweight Champion, Mr. William Huckabee, and I'll warn you, Matt, he may try to get booked. But, Will, what questions do you have?
First of all, Stevie J, if you're going to say it, you got to say it right. It's the AIWF World Heavyweight Champion. Let's not forget the world part. But no, I will not try to, pander to our guests and try to get booked. I feel like he's a very smart promoter, and he knows what talent is available and what talent's out there.
There you go.
My first question, Matt, is this, because correct me if I'm wrong, but DEFY just celebrated their 1-year anniversary, correct?
Yes, in February we did.
Yes. So, I mean, you've done so much in 14 months. You've accomplished things that a lot of companies, with 10 to 15 years of being around haven't accomplished. Are you kind of waiting for the bubble to burst? And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but you have such great talent. Your champions you had matches on Impact Wrestling on national TV. Shane Strickland just defended the DEFY championship down in New Orleans and stuff during WrestleMania week. Are you really thinking that the bubble is going to burst on you guys?
No, because the way that I look at it like a business, and so we look at the numbers, and we see that our average ticket sales increase. More people paid per event has been increasing, and it's been gradually climbing, And locally, at least, I'm concerned the most about building the brand name, so that way people in the area, when they think about professional wrestling, they think about DEFY Wrestling. That's our goal. Our goal is to build that brand name and to build our product and grow slowly. And there's been periods of time in the last 14 months where we've actually stepped back and slowed our growth down on purpose because we don't want to go too fast. You don't want to run too many shows and overextend yourself financially, and because that's when you get into trouble. You just got to be careful with how you run things. I don't think the bubble's going to burst. Not now. I don't think it'll burst in the near future. I expect it will happen eventually because it happens to everybody. But by the time it does burst, we'll be prepared for it to where we'll be able to plateau and ride that plateau for a while.
Now, I'm so glad that you mentioned numbers and stuff because, like Stevie told you, I'm the professional wrestler on the panel. So, of course, I
Sure.
speak to promoters and deal with promoters on a daily basis. And a lot of promoters, and you might not realize this, but a lot of promoters, this is just a vanity project. They just want to get themselves booked. They just want to get their friends booked, and they don't look at it as a business. When you're preparing a show, when you guys are putting together a show and stuff, what are some of the numbers and some of the things that you guys really look at when you're planning the show and when you're thinking about going to a different area?
One of the first things we look at, of course, is our set budget, like our set expenses, what your rent, your transportation costs, and things like that. Things that you have to do no matter what. Then you look at the available number of tickets that you have available to sell, and it's a weird formula that you have to use. You kind of think, well, geez, if I sell the first row tickets and we sell out the first front row, that will pay for X number of guys to come in. We sell at the second row, okay, that'll take care of these expenses. That's how we kind of budget it. It's like, hey, if we sell at the first 2 rows or the first 3 rows, our show's at least breaking even. And then anything after that point, it's kind of like profit. That's not every building that you run, but it's kind of like something that you want to look for. You want to make sure that you're not overextending yourself. So that way, worst case scenario, if you bomb and you just present them a product that they don't want to see and they don't want to buy tickets for, you're not killing yourself with fly-ins and overhead, So it's just something, at the end of the day, no matter what, in the promotional business, it's still a gamble.
Now, my last question before I hand it back to my co-host, is because once again, you guys are still the new kids on the block in Washington State, in the Pacific Northwest in general. And you guys have kind of placed yourself as the company to work for when it comes to working in the Pacific Northwest. What's your relationship with other promoters? Have you gotten any negative feedback? The stereotypical, oh, we're going to tear your posters down, or we're going to tell our fans this about your company, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Man, I've been in wrestling a long time, so that stuff is going to happen. There's always going to be people that are jealous, and we remind ourselves all the time, and we talk about it all the time, well, let's not worry about what they're doing. Let's worry about what we're doing. And it's just something that we always repeat to each other. And it's the truth. I don't care what they're doing. I really don't. I've got a great relationship with both of us have good relationships with a lot of promoters. There are some promoters out there that I think are garbage. I think what they're doing is garbage, but that's going to happen anywhere, there's also some really great promotions out there and some really great guys and some great talent. So that's what I concentrate on, as a wrestler, if there's 100 wrestlers in your state that you live in, there's probably 30 that are good.
Oh, I live in North Carolina, so trust me. There's at least 1,000 wrestlers in North Carolina, and there might be 100 good ones.
Exactly. And so that's what I look for. I look for those ones that are good. I look for those wrestlers that are motivated, that I could see going out of the state of Washington and making it elsewhere. Those are the guys that I look for. The other guys, I don't care because that's not what I'm looking to promote, And it's just like same with promotional companies. We have a product, we have an idea in our mind that we want to promote, and that's what we worry about.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to my co-host,
Thanks,
Jason, a.k.a. The Great Sudoku. Jason, what do you have for our guest tonight?
I'm going to go very old school here and see how this all ties in, because when I think about Pacific Northwest Wrestling, what comes to mind is the old NWA member, PNW Wrestling, that was run by Don Owen through like the 60s and the 80s, that had a lot of big names come through, guys like Moondog Mayne, Roddy Piper, Jesse Ventura, Mad Dog Vachon, people like that. And Don Owen was known as a promoter who didn't screw people over and a guy who would spend money. And while we're talking about frugality a bit, it also seems like you're not afraid to spend money on wrestlers who are worth it and to bring in some of the top indie talent. And were you a fan of PNW? Was Don Owen a guy you looked to kind of create a business model when you were setting up DEFY Wrestling?
In a way, it's not the same model. Let me see here. It's the Don Owen territory days. It was a great period of time. I grew up watching it. I've been in the ring with like Roddy Piper and Buddy Rose, and Buddy Rose was like a mentor to me, so I know all those guys. I wrestled a lot of the guys. Billy Jack Haynes showed me how to do a headlock, so I've got a lot of experience with that, and as you guys mentioned, I'm kind of a historian, and I'm known mostly as a Northwest historian, so you ask me something about the Northwest, I'd probably know it. But the thing is that I studied that stuff. I studied the history to see what they did right and they did wrong. Don Owens did a lot of good things, but as a promoter, he did a lot of bad things too. So those are things that you just keep in the back of your mind. Wrestling today is not how wrestling was back in the 70s. And as much as I loved wrestling in the 70s or in the 80s, you can't present that product today. The number of people, the small fraction of people that would be interested in watching that product, they're not going to go to an arena and spend $25 for a ticket. That's just the truth. Just like the WWE Network, why they don't spend more money and time on releasing old network shows or old wrestling shows, because there's not an audience for it. Their biggest numbers come from modern product shows, new, first run programming. And so that's something that you have to keep in mind. We know we have an idea of what fans like today, and that's what we want to present them. We want to present them with a sophisticated, modern wrestling product, a lot of action and a lot of guys that they're familiar with, because, people will pay for names that they're familiar with. So, while I do like the Don Owens product, I love it in fact, I wouldn't compare what we do to what Don Owen did. At all.
Not even as a spiritual successor of sorts.
Well, there's comparisons to be made, but, the truth is that I've been in the Northwest for a long time, and every company that came along, it seems they tried to call themselves the new Portland Wrestling. Or, they tried to compare themselves with Don Owens Wrestling. And they all failed. Because, Don Owens' business he went out of business in 1991. There's a reason why he went out of business, So why harp on the past? I'd rather create something new, Nostalgia only takes you so far.
Right, and you said that he did do some things well and some things bad, so yeah, definitely learn from the past and go with what worked and go with what works now as opposed to what works then, and don't repeat the mistakes that were made in the past.
And, and this is a historian in me talking, but Don Owen was a great promoter, but he never left the city of Portland, He ran Oregon, and he ran a 2,500 seat building week in and week out for 40 years, and he didn't take chances. He didn't expand his territory. He didn't grow his territory. The biggest success in the Northwest came during periods of time when other promoters were running different cities for him, The biggest business was done when one of his partners was running Seattle. So it wasn't Don necessarily doing the work. He was just kind of like the godfather of it.
He was just doing
So,
Portland, where you're doing Washington and you're doing Oregon, and it looks like you're even doing Montana as well.
Yeah. This coming month, we've been promoting what we call like our spring tour, the DEFY Spring Tour. So we have a show tomorrow in Seattle. Then April 28th, we have Tacoma, Washington. May 4th and May 5th, we're in Missoula, Montana, and Spokane, Washington. And then May 26th, we're in Portland.
Yeah, so it's not just Portland anymore. It's all branched out, which is impressive.
Yeah, that's one of the things we're doing. We're expanding DEFY Wrestling. We're going into new markets and seeing what we could do in those areas.
Hey, Jason, you mind if I jump in for a second?
Go for it.
I have to ask this because I'm mildly amused by a coincidence here, but I recently made a friend on Facebook who's from Yakima, and I also heard on the latest Brian and Vinny show them talking about how WCW used to run Yakima, and they were astounded by that. Could DEFY Wrestling ever run Yakima?
We actually have. We actually have not run in Yakima yet. We had a show booked out there last year, but there was an issue with the building, so we had to pull out of the booking. But yeah, Yakima's a great town for wrestling. It's a great town for Lucha Libre. So I could definitely see doing something there in the future for sure.
All right, well then I'm definitely going to let John know because he's a wrestling fan, so he'd love it.
Yeah, Yakima's had wrestling for years, heck, they used to have weekly shows, so yeah, great wrestling town.
And now I want to go to the wrestling historian part while we're talking about that. What do you consider
All right.
the definitive map of Washington State, in the last 40 years? Like, what were the places that were the hottest wrestling beds besides the ones we've already mentioned? Are there any, like, obscure gems that people don't know?
Excuse me. We talked about Yakima. There was a promotion in Washington during the 1970s called Superstar Wrestling, and they ran TV out of Yakima. They would tape TV every Wednesday afternoon in Yakima. Then they ran a house show that evening in Yakima, and they always did great business in Yakima, and it was a full-time territory. They ran the entire state of Washington. It was ran by a guy named Dean Silverstone, who is one of the board members of Cauliflower Alley Club.
Awesome.
And that promotion did great business for a few years. They were, every Tuesday they were in Seattle, and they were selling out their theater, which was a 2,500 seat theater. They would sell out the Armory in Yakima, which is like a 3,000 seat Armory every Wednesday. Which is that's great business for a small outlaw territory promotion. So that's kind of like a little hidden gem that not many people know about.
Is that library out there somewhere? Is there like a website where you can access it? Because I don't think I've ever seen that on the network.
No, not on WWE Network. No. Matter of fact, I don't think any footage exists of the promotion that I know of.
Ooh, that's a shame.
Yeah. It is. The footage from out in this area, there's not a lot of footage. Buddy Rose had some footage that was in his garage that was discovered, or transferred to DVD that is out there you see on YouTube. That stuff's pretty rare, but besides that, yeah, there's not a lot of footage, especially in the last 40 years or so.
Now, you mentioned working with Buddy Rose and Billy Jack Haynes and some of the other greats of the Pacific Northwest. When did you first break into the wrestling business? When was that?
In 1993, I started refereeing because I was in high school still. I refereed for a while and then got into the ring myself. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun. Got to wrestle with and meet a lot of guys that were in the territory days, and yeah, it was great.
It's kind of an interesting time that you broke in, though, because I would call that like the dying days of the territory era. I mean, in the late 80s, you had a few that were still hanging on, clinging to dear life, but I think by the early 90s, WWF had pretty much wiped all of them off the map.
Yeah, very much so. I wrestled for Sandy Barr a lot, who was, father of Art Barr.
Right, the Jews.
And Sandy was what? Yeah, exactly. And Sandy ran a territory himself as part of Don Mills' promote. He ran some of Don's towns for him. And he had weekly TV that was every Sunday. It was taped down in Vancouver, Washington. And there's some of that stuff floating around there. Excuse me, I've got like a cold. So, but it was still like a regular weekly town, weekly. He still had weekly towns, so that was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'll go into a obscure sidebar that maybe only you and I and a couple other people would know, but what about YWF? Did you ever do anything with them?
I did, actually. I did one little, it's funny because my friend and I, we had been training to be pro wrestlers at this time, and we went there, and we might have even had like a match or two at the time. And for those people that don't know what YWF is, it's called the Youth Wrestling Federation. It was a backyard promotion started by Brian Alvarez. And they ran shows in like a gymnast building. And there was no ring, just gym mats and the floor, it was like a gymnast floor, so it had spring to it. And my friend and I, we went there, and I was friends with Brian and a few of his friends and stuff like that. And my friend and I, we wrestled, and we were wrestling like real professionals, and they were kind of scared of us. So we only did it once, Yeah. It was really bad, by the way. Really bad.
But that doesn't mean I don't have fun hearing about it when Brian waxes poetic about the good old days. That match they had.
Yeah, although they were not. I saw Brian's very first pro match, and so it was not the good old days. I'll see Brian tomorrow. He's actually going to be in the corner of Filthy Tom Lawler at our show tomorrow night in Seattle.
That's right. Well, on that very subject, why don't we run down this whole card, because we've talked about the main event, but let's give everybody the flavor of the full DEFY Vibes show.
Awesome, yeah. So tomorrow night in Seattle, Washington, at Washington Hall, which is like a very historic building. Really cool. Man, it's a great experience there. We've got the DEFY champion Shane Strickland going one-on-one with the Impact World Heavyweight champion Austin Aries. We also have Tommy Dreamer, ECW Tommy Dreamer, going one-on-one with the weirdo hero, Ravenous Randy Myers. And this is a guy who a lot of people are not familiar with, but he wrestled Sami Callihan on Impact Wrestling a few months ago. And, man, he is just really drawn interest from a ton of people. Super experienced guy. He's been around forever, just never had his chance, But he's been really coming along, and our fans love him. I mean, he's just become such a popular guy out here in the Northwest. So that match is going to be really exciting. We also have a big match with, and by big I mean big guys involved. Excuse me. The one and only Brody King, and I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Brody King. He's a Southern California guy. Been making a lot of big waves. He just debuted with PWG. He's been wrestling for MLW a lot out in Florida. He's like a giant luchador. He's like 6'4", tatted up, and moves like a cat. He's wrestling a guy by the name of Shaft, who's another young wrestler who's just a big bruiser dude who's, man, he's a year in the business, but he's already phenomenal. And then after that, we have a triple threat match with Tom Lawler. Brian Alvarez is going to be in the corner of Tom Lawler versus Mike Santiago and Matt Cross.
M-Dog.
From Lucha Underground. Yeah, M-Dog. Originally we were going to have a singles match there, and then Tom Lawler broke his arm. So we weren't sure if Tom was going to be able to continue, so I booked another guy. Then when Tom was able to come back and said he was going to be okay, we just turned it into a triple threat match. So, no one's out on a booking. But yeah, that's going to be a good match because all three of those guys, Mike Santiago, he's a local guy, but he's very good. Last month we had him in there against the Lucha Brothers, and the match was just phenomenal. So that match is going to be great. We also have, I'm trying to think of all the matches we have. So, okay, we also have 2 first round tag team matches in our Defy 8X Grand Prix tag team tournament, which is going to crown our tag team champions, which the finals will be in July. So, yeah, on tomorrow's show we have 6 matches. But like I said, it's going to be, the main event's going to be awesome. Actually, all the matches will be awesome. But it's going to be a great night. And right now we're nearly sold out. We just have a handful of standing room only tickets available.
All right. Well, I got to ask you a question about M-Dog because one of my all-time favorite indie wrestling moments was an IWA Mid-South 10-penny invitational I went to in Midlothian where he and Human Tornado had a spontaneous dance-off in the middle of the ring. Have you ever seen M-Dog bust any moves out for you?
I don't know. I actually haven't. I'm going to have to ask him about that tomorrow. I don't think I've seen him, like on tape I have, on TV and tapes and stuff, I've seen him do that. But never live. I don't think I've ever seen him do it live, which is weird because he's a very musically inclined guy. Mm-hmm. So I'll ask him about that tomorrow. Maybe I could get him to do something out there.
Absolutely. If you can get him to do it, it'll be fun. The crowd will go nuts for it. I guarantee you I did.
Yeah. Maybe I'll try to get him and Tom Lawler to have a dance-off.
Oh, I'd love it. I want the video of that. I want to see that.
Yeah.
How is Tom's arm anyway? Is it 100% now? Is he totally healed up?
I know he wrestled last weekend, and he was wearing some protective glove over it, some more protective, something protective over his forearm. So it was nasty looking though. He sent me the X-rays of it, and it was bad. It was a bad break. So I hope he's doing well.
I guess that's a lesson learned for him though. Don't ever try to give somebody a clothesline with your forearm right on the top of their skull. Bad things happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So. Yeah, but no, I'm glad he's doing good. He's made a lot of, as a pro wrestler, he's made huge strides. You know, he's become really good in the last 6-7 months. So, good to have him on the card.
What do you think of all these wrestlers that have come from MMA lately that are doing great things in pro wrestling, like Shayna Baszler, Matt Riddle, Filthy Tom Lawler? What do you make of this?
I love it. I honestly do. I like that style. That style of wrestling to me is my favorite. Like, I like the high flying and stuff, but at the end of the day, my favorite is just like that hardcore, like, trading holds, hitting each other really hard. That kind of stuff. I like that. So I think it's great. I think the fundamentals that they learn in MMA are easily transferable. And as a matter of fact, it's like, I think a lot of pro wrestlers, they should take the cue and learn how to do a little bit of shooting. Because it makes everything look better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I absolutely feel that way when I watch a Minoru Suzuki match, and I know my co-hosts agree on that, because when he puts somebody on a hold, you feel the pain. You feel like he really could rip their limbs off and take them home.
Yeah. Yeah, even simple things like takedowns, and rides and reversals and everything like that. If you know how to do those in an amateur setting, it's so easy to transfer over in a professional setting, So I love that style.
Indeed. All right. Well, I know you've got a cold, and you've also got a big show coming up that you got to do, so I don't want to keep you too long, but I want to tag in my co-hosts one more time if they have any last questions. So, Will, do you have anything else for Mr. Farmer?
I was going to say, I was actually going to ask him about Defy on Demand and see if we could get like a discount code or something, because I love the product. I've been, keeping tabs on it and stuff, especially for the fact that I have a lot of friends in the Pacific Northwest and stuff. So I wanted to hear about Defy on Demand and see if there's any codes or any discounts we can get for being, friends of the company.
Here's the honest truth. I don't even know what my own discount code is. I gotta check. Like, I get the files of the show, without going on the actual DEFY on demand. And my partner Jim, who handles a lot of the technical side of things, because he's got a long background in that. So Jim is the one that does he's responsible for all of our awesome posters and a lot of our cool artwork and production. He spends a lot of time working with that, and he would be the guy to talk to. He gave me a code to get on there for free, and I don't even know how to make it work. So I have to check with him first, honestly. So, but yeah, I'll see what I could do. But what we've been doing with DEFY on Demand, we've been producing these weekly episodes. So it's like an episodic television show that you could watch now on DEFY on Demand. So it's been really cool. We've been using Rich Bikini, who was, formerly of NXT, who does commentary for our shows, and it's been awesome. It's great.
Well, I tell you what, I don't subscribe to a lot of on-demand channels. I got New Japan World. I think I have Progress now, thanks to Jason and stuff. And then I have, hotspots.com because I'm a Carolina guy. But I'm definitely going to have to subscribe to DEFY on Demand and stuff and see what's going out there on the West Coast.
Well, I know that with the High Spots on Demand, I know that you can watch some DEFY events on High Spots. So you can check us out on there too.
I have that, and that's how I know about the product and stuff. So,
okay.
I'm gonna go ahead and pass it back over to either Jason or Steve and let them wrap it up.
Well,
I have one more question before we leave, and this was something that crossed my mind, and you touched on it a little bit. At first, I was wondering, what is this 8X Tag GP? You touched on it briefly, saying that it's a tournament to crown your first tag team champions. What exactly does this tournament entail?
8 matches, so it's an 8 times, 8 matches, 8-man Grand Prix, tournament. Kind of like harken back to the old Pride FC days where they would have their Grand Prix tournaments, or the old New Japan tournaments where they'd be Grand Prix tournaments. And I kind of like the name Grand Prix, but better than I like the name just a basic tournament. And so it's an 8-team single elimination tournament. We will have 2 matches tomorrow night, and then we'll have 2 matches in Portland May 26th, and those will be the 4 matches in the first round. And then the shows following that will have the remaining matches.
Well, at least you can call it a tournament or a Grand Prix. You don't have to use a goofy-ass term like eliminator.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly.
I guess that's my final question then as I wrap it up. When you see and hear some of these things that go on with WWE, like how they can't say championship and they can't say tournament, what does that make you think as a wrestling historian and fan that they are doing to the state of pro wrestling?
Man, here's what's really weird is that used to bug me. Today it doesn't bug me so much because I realize that by studying wrestling history, I've realized that nothing is sacred in wrestling, nothing is new in wrestling, and current generations have always complained about how bad, former generations have always complained about what's going on currently in wrestling. George Hackenschmidt in the 1930s used to complain about Jim Londos and that era of wrestling, how phony it was.
Yeah.
So, and William Muldoon before that did the same thing. And so it's like, well, man, this has been such a recurring thing over the years. Why continue to do it? Because it's always going to evolve. It's always going to change. You know what I mean? And it always has. So, it doesn't bother me as much anymore. I understand why Vince does it. He doesn't care if people don't like that it's not the wrestling of the 1950s. He doesn't care about that, And to be honest, the fans of today, they don't care either because they don't know anything about it. It's just to us hardcore fans, very small percentage of fans, we're the only ones that care about that stuff.
I suppose that's true. So, on that note,
Yeah.
I will let you get in final plugs. We've already said where it is, when it is, but run it by everybody one more time. The website and all the other details. Let's cram it all in right here one more time.
Awesome. Well, I'll keep it short and simple. DEFYWrestling.com is where you can find out more information about the promotion. Follow us on all social media at DEFY Wrestling NW. And that's about it. I mean, you can follow me on Twitter too. Mine is at MattFarmer93. I often just post stuff about DEFY Wrestling, or once in a while I post some like cool little historical like programs or photos or IDs or, you know, letters. Silly things like that. So, yeah.
Yep, and that's always how I've had fun following you on Twitter, was because I knew you always brought the wrestling history to the internet wrestling community, if we want to use that hackneyed phrase. So it's always been fun following you.
That's one thing.
Go ahead.
As a one more thing, as a wrestling historian, one thing that I like to do is information on the internet. There's so much false information regarding wrestling history out there that when I see something false, I like to correct it so that way it's corrected as historical. Corrected historically, you know what I mean? Like, simple example, Andre the Giant's height.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody knows he wasn't 7'4".
Even Vince admitted that in the HBO documentary. He said, was he 7'4"? Probably not.
Exactly. But there's so many people that just cannot let that go, you know? But it's like, as a historian, you should not cover up lies that have been perpetrated throughout the years. So why do it, you know? I'd rather stick to curating the facts of wrestling history than to continue on with propelling the myths that have happened over the years. So that's all, you know, nothing major.
Indeed. But that leaves me one more question, if you'll indulge me. Do you think we'll ever get everybody on the same page about the actual WrestleMania 3 attendance?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
You could have a written document from Vince McMahon himself stating clearly that 93,173 people were not in attendance at WrestleMania 3, and you'd still have people that said, well, I could look at that picture and it looks about right. So, you know, it's just like everything else. So there wasn't 75,000 people in the Superdome last Sunday either.
No.
There was maybe 65,000.
Yeah.
You know? The last time, didn't they say 78,000? The last time they were there, they said 75,000, but when the actual real numbers came out during the press conference, it was like 65,000, so.
Right. It's long been my assumption that they always inflate it by at least 10 to 15,000 every time.
Yeah. You know, it's pretty cool. In the last 10, 12 years, that's about the average. There's about 10,000 fans that they inflate it by.
Well, on that note, Matt, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say Mania 3 was probably inflated by about 10, 12,000 fans. So.
Yeah, I've always heard 78 is closer to the truth, but we'll let you and other wrestling historians out there, like our friend Carl Stern, keep putting the truth out there and let everybody know the real facts. So follow Matt Farmer 93, and please, if you live in the Northwest, don't miss DEFY Wrestling tomorrow night and wherever else they are on tour, DEFYWrestling.com. Matt, thank you so much. Let's do this again really soon.
For sure. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Have a nice night.
Yep, you too. All right, Matt Farmer right here on Thursday Night AMP. A great conversation, a wrestling historian, and a fun guy to talk to. So, Jason, Will, I hope you enjoyed it as well.
I love talking to promoters who are doing things right, who are successful. And one of the things that he said that really stuck out with me was when he said, we're not focused on what everybody else is doing. We're just focused on what we're doing and what we do well. Like, I love promoters who have that mind state. I love promoters who don't book based on feelings or emotions, but they book based on numbers and what the fans want. Like, we just, on the Wrestling Nerdcast, we just interviewed Brian Kanabrowski and stuff from PWX here in North Carolina, and he spoke and basically said the same things word for word that our guest tonight said, and that's why these two gentlemen and their respective companies are as successful as they are.
You know what? We've had a hell of a week between Kanabrewski on your show and Farmer on our show. It's been like the indie wrestling supercade right here on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
Exactly. And like I said, it's so good to see two different gentlemen who literally live as far away from each other as humanly possible. Yeah. North Carolina and then Washington State. And they have the exact same mind state. They have the exact same business sense and stuff. And you can see the results of their hard work and stuff.
Absolutely. And I think Jason might be more interested in watching either of those promotions than ever watching WrestleMania ever
I'd be more interested in talking to Mr. Farmer about, I mean, he said he started in 93 under Sandy Barr, and you were talking about how that was kind of the beginning of the end for territories in general and how that one kind of lasted. But yeah, he could write a book just on the beginning of the end of Pacific Northwest there, what his experiences were like there. That would be something I'd love to pick his brain about sometime.
Well, then we'll definitely have him back, and we'll get even more into the wrestling history side of things. And since I mentioned Carl Stern, I've got to have him back on too. He's not the easiest guy to book because he's got a very busy schedule. He also works as a police officer, but as wrestling historians go, he's right up there with Matt Farmer in my book as guys that can tell the truth and tell what really happened and not just the mythology of wrestling. And that to me, I guess, I'm the hardcore that Matt talks about, but in that hardcore realm, I love knowing the actual factual events and not just the mythology. I love getting behind the scenes. And guys, that's why I love this HBO documentary on Andre the Giant, because it told the real stories. It told the real town he was from, not the French Alps. It showed his real family. You got to meet his brothers. You got to meet his daughter. You got to see all the things that he did coming up in the territorial days before he became this attraction for the World Wrestling Federation. It was a great look at the real man and not just the myth.
I'll have to check out. I haven't had into any of his Japanese stuff, Stevie.
They didn't go too heavily into the Japanese stuff. It was mentioned that he toured in Japan and that he was a big heel in Japan, but there were things that I guess they just couldn't get to in the span of 90 minutes because, like, for example, the famous Maeda shoot where he humbled Andre, that didn't make it into there, but I would have loved to have seen them cover that.
Oh, yeah.
Will, what were you going to say?
I'm going to say, I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but hopefully I have it on DVR, so I'll probably get into it after we finish recording tonight. I've tried to avoid, any spoilers when it came to that.
Yeah, well, I'm not spoiling anything by telling you it really tells the true story, because it does. I mean, down to the nitty-gritty of how bad things were for him in the late 80s and early 90s and his health and how he could have addressed those things years before and chose not to. And it's sad, but it's also profound because it tells you just how much he wanted to entertain people that he was taking chances with his own life.
So this is not like a polished over WWE production.
No, not at all, which is ironic because Vince McMahon is in it. And as Dave Meltzer himself said, and he too is in it, it's as close to the truthful Vince McMahon as you will ever get.
Wow.
And there's something that happens to Vince late in the documentary that I don't even want to spoil for you because when you see it, you'll be shocked, and I was.
Okay, well, don't spoil it for me.
Yeah, I won't tell you. But, guys, it's definitely worth a watch. But before we wrap it up tonight, I want to get everybody's brief thoughts on TakeOver and WrestleMania. I think I kind of know Jason's thoughts, but I'll start with Will.
TakeOver was amazing. The ladder match was just full of, cringeworthy, oh my God, who thought of this shit spots. But overall, as to be expected, the gentlemen and ladies and stuff of NXT went above and beyond the Call of Duty and had a fantastic show. Overall, it was a fantastic show. Probably should have came on Sunday instead of WrestleMania, but I'm not the wrestling fan in me, and being the person that was watching WrestleMania with my kids, I couldn't be, the bitter, cynical critic that I probably would have been if I had watched it by myself. But watching it with my kids, I enjoyed it. There were some things I didn't agree with. Surprisingly, did not have a problem with, Braun teaming up with the little 10-year-old. I actually had a bigger issue with the order of the matches more than anything else. I feel there were some matches that I was disappointed at the length of the entire pre-show and the show. I was disappointed in that. But I was also disappointed in the order of the matches. I felt like some matches could have been on the pre-show. Some of the matches didn't really have to be on the show. But overall, I'll give it a C+.
I think that's higher than Jason's going to go.
Yeah, well, first TakeOver was great, and leading off with that ladder match, I mean, that was excitement, and they just kind of had that knob cranked up to 12 the whole night on TakeOver, and my only complaint with TakeOver would be the unsanctioned main event, just that it went on a little long. It wasn't a bad match, but it went on longer than it had to, but other than that, fantastic card. Yeah, I turned Mania off after the second official match, and I have given up on WWE for 2018. Fuck that owl. I'm done with them. I'm not even going to pretend to care on this show about them anymore, and when Vince McMahon dies, I am going to throw a party, and I am going to find his grave and piss on it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's exactly the reaction I was expecting, so let me split possibly the difference. I don't know if it's going to be right down the middle, but I'm going to first agree with everybody that TakeOver was the better show, by far. In fact, the best match I saw the entire weekend, I will actually give to Gargano and Ciampa, even though it went on last, and it was a little weird for that, and it was quote-unquote unsanctioned. The story they told was phenomenal. The heat was unbelievable, out of this world. That is the most FU chance I have ever heard for a wrestler outside of John Cena versus Triple H at WrestleMania. That was just intense. And that match, my wife doesn't even follow NXT, and she was so thrilled when Gargano got that tap out at the end using the brace. She gave me a high five. That's how invested she got in the match. So, to me, when it sucks her in and she doesn't even know Gargano or Ciampa that well because she doesn't follow NXT, that to me is a win. That's the 5-star match of the weekend. But I didn't turn off WrestleMania. I agree with Will that the order was a little wonky, and for that reason, some parts of the show really lagged and were really slow. But the matches that were good were actually better than I thought they would be. Ronda Rousey and Kurt Angle versus Triple H and Stephanie, better than I thought it would be. It exceeded my expectations. The 3-way for the Intercontinental title, that exceeded my expectations.
How about the United States title match?
I think it was okay.
Yeah, that was one of the matches that should have been earlier in the show, because that match kind of sucked the vibe that was going with WrestleMania up to that point.
I didn't hate it, but if I hated anything, I hated the fact that they broke Asuka's streak.
For nothing. Charlotte did not need that victory. It does nothing for Charlotte. It derails Asuka. It's like Vince just took a shit on Japan, Japanese wrestlers, and fans who like Japanese wrestling at WrestleMania. That was Vince did, and I will pay him back by pissing on his grave.
Okay, can I go first, Will? I got to address that, because I was upset as a fan of Japanese wrestling, but at least with the Nakamura Styles match, I kind of like that direction. I actually like Nakamura going heel and being a bit of a jerk. I think this actually freshens him up a little bit.
Yes, I was going to say
WWE would Shinsuke Nakamura need to be freshened up. Let's call a spade here.
I like heel Nakamura better anyway. I agree with you As far as the Charlotte match goes, like Charlotte didn't need that win, but with watching Raw the next night and seeing Carmella cash in her Money in the Bank contract, I'm glad that she did it to Charlotte and not Asuka.
Mm-hmm. You mean on SmackDown, because that was Tuesday
Yeah, I'm sorry,
night.
SmackDown, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a slap in the face too, that Asuka couldn't beat Charlotte Flair, but Carmella can.
Yeah, but Carmella did it in the cheapest way possible.
Well, of course. But I mean, that's what the Money in the Bank contract is supposed to be for. So heels can get the title in the slimiest way possible. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. Like I said, it's like with 2020 hindsight being what it is, I'm glad that if they were going to put the title on Carmella, which is obvious because they put the Raw Women's title on the babyface and Nia Jax, which for the record, and I know we haven't talked about this, that is probably the most disappointing storyline in WWE.
Actually, the disappointing thing about that match was how cold it was at the point it came in the show, because I actually liked the story that the two of them were telling, especially when Nia busted out the "I loved you" right before she beat the ever-loving piss out of Alexa. I was emotionally into it, but that crowd couldn't have cared less because they had been sitting there for 7 hours.
I didn't like it, and I hate that storyline, and especially the fact I'm seriously disappointed in the fact that Mickie James is involved with that storyline, being the fact that, 10 years ago, they were doing the whole Piggy James storyline where they were making fun of her weight, and now here's Mickie James making fun of a female who was plus size.
I don't care what anybody says. Nia Jax is hot.
She is.
Oh,
she is
guys, did you see her outfit at the Hall of Fame? She was stunning.
Yes. I mean, I just don't like that storyline. I mean, wrestling is wrestling, and sometimes you don't need some convoluted storyline where every time you turn around, and my wife brought this up, and she's not a wrestling fan at all. She was like, is she the only person in WWE that's fat? And I was like, no. She's like, well, why do they keep bringing up her size then? If she's like, they don't bring up any other fat guy.
Tamina's bigger, but not quite as big as Nia Jax is.
And let's not overlook the fact that Will made an excellent point about Mickie James being in the whole Piggy James angle.
And she wasn't even fat. Yeah, I mean, she was.
She was a little curvy, but definitely not fat. I wouldn't even call Nia fat. I mean, but Mickie has actually been called on the carpet for it in interviews. People are not letting that slide. People have said to her, hey, this angle, they bullied you, and now you're being a bully. People have called her out on it.
Well, good, because it's very disappointing as a person, not even as a wrestler, but as a person. It's very disappointing that, when they were doing the whole Piggy James storyline, people was like, hey, that's completely unfair, et cetera, et cetera. And there was so much pressure on her to lose weight and live up to a certain standard. And now here she goes 10, 15 years later doing the same thing to another talent.
And her, I don't know if I agree with her explanation, but her explanation is, well, I've been on the other side of the coin, so I know how it feels, so I can portray this character better than anybody.
And I'm going to call bullshit.
Okay, well, on that note, then, let's wrap it up with some cheap plugs. Will, what do you got?
This weekend, after a long 2.5 weeks of traveling to Mexico and making my debut at IWA Mid-South, where I got 2 standing ovations 2 days in a row, I'm kind of... I know. What? I'm kind of taking it easy this weekend, and I will be, Sunday is my only show day. I will be in Greensboro, North Carolina for Firestar Pro Wrestling Presents the Zone 1 season finale. I will be defending my Zone 1 Platinum title against TDT in I don't know, I think it's supposed to be a Falls Count Anywhere, no holds barred, unsanctioned match, actually. And that's about it. Be sure to check me out every week on this network for the Wrestling Nerdcast with Mika Villas. Check out this past week's episode where I literally feel like it was the best episode the best interview we've ever done with our Pro Wrestling Experiences owner, Brian Kanabrowski. If you're a promoter or if you promote any kind of entertainment in any genre, whether it's wrestling, music, art, et cetera, if you don't listen to that interview and learn something, you are an idiot. And then this week we have Midwest Standout KLD, which is going to be super fun as well.
All right. And on that note, I might also add follow McAvillis on social media. She was live streaming from WrestleMania in New Orleans, and that was a hoot. She was so much fun, and she was like, tell me things to say, because I have no filter. I will yell it at people. She was just having a ball.
Well, she also, luckily for me, she also was live streaming at Joey Janela's Spring Break Bash. So I was able to see Riddle versus Suzuki live as it happened, and I was popping in my hotel room.
Absolutely, yeah. She was on point with the social media, so you should all be following her. And Jason, where can they follow you, and what are you up to?
And you can follow me on Twitter at Great Sudoku. What will I plug? Let's see. If anyone out there is still subscribed to WWE Network, cancel it and spend your money instead on New Japan World. It's the best 999 yen you can spend. You'll be saving a couple pennies on the cost of what WWE Network would cost you, and New Japan doesn't suck.
Or you know what? Do what I did. Cancel WWE Network and take the free month when they offer it to you, and then take 3 months for 33 cents a month, and then take 2 more months for $5 a month, and save all that money and spend it on New Japan.
And just keep canceling the network, because those are the kinds of numbers that I like to see.
You know what? The more times you cancel it, the more offers you get. You get it for free, you get it for cheap, you get it for anything less than $9.99, and you can spend that money elsewhere. So
spend that on New Japan, spend that on Progress, spend that on DEFY.
Indeed. Spend it on all of those things. And one more time, DEFYWrestling.com and at MattFarmer93 on Twitter. Thank you, Matt, for joining us. Will, Jason, thank you for co-hosting with me. And you, the listening audience, thank you for listening to Thursday Night AMP. We'll see you again in 7 days.